The emergency HOA meeting on Tuesday evening was standing room only. Karen had never seen the community center so packed, not even during the heated debate over permissible fence heights last summer. She stood at the podium, facing a crowd that had, until recently, feared her clipboard and citation pad. "Before we begin official proceedings," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I'd like to address the social media posts from this weekend." The room fell silent. Karen had spent 48 hours soul-searching after the gazebo incident, alternating between righteous indignation and uncomfortable self-reflection. "The documents shared were authentic," she continued, ignoring the whispers that rippled through the crowd. "And while I maintain that rules exist for a reason, I recognize that my enforcement methods have been zealous." That's one word for it. Someone called from the back. Nervous laughter spread through the room. Karen gripped the edges of the podium. "The vote of no confidence scheduled for tonight is unnecessary. I'm stepping down as HOA president, effective immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen had imagined this moment would bring relief to her neighbors, perhaps even celebration. Instead, she saw shock, confusion, and on some faces, something that looked unsettlingly like concern. Dave Peterson stood up from his seat in the third row. "Before anyone celebrates too quickly, maybe we should consider what happens next. Karen's been running this place like a military operation for years. Who's going to handle the landscaping contracts? The reserve fund? The insurance claim for the gazebo?" From the corner, Judy Miller, whose wind chimes had been Karen's final citation, rose slowly. "I never thought I'd say this, but Dave's right. Karen, you've been terrible to live with, but extraordinary at managing this community." Karen blinked back unexpected tears. "I believe Helen is vice president and fully capable." "I'm not," Helen Chambers interrupted. "I have neither the time nor, frankly, your attention to detail." The meeting dissolved into chaos as neighbors argued about succession plans. Karen stood frozen at the podium, watching the community she had micromanaged for years struggle with the prospect of her absence. Later, as people filed out after the inconclusive meeting, Dave approached Karen in the parking lot. "That was unexpected," he said, leaning against her immaculately maintained Honda Civic. "Which part?" Karen replied, "My resignation or the apparent lack of celebration?" Dave chuckled. "Both. You know what your problem is, Karen? You think rules are the same as leadership. And you think breaking rules is the same as freedom," she shot back. "Maybe we're both wrong," he conceded. "The neighborhood needs structure, but it also needs heart. You've got one of those things in spades. The other, well, that gazebo might have crushed more than just wood." Karen looked up at the stars, considering his words. "I don't know how to be different." "Start small," Dave suggested. "Tomorrow's my daughter's birthday. She's setting up that lemonade stand you shut down last year. Stop by. Don't bring your measuring tape." As he walked away, Karen felt something shift inside her, not the collapse of her principles, but perhaps the awakening of something that had been buried beneath them for too long. The next morning, she found herself walking toward the sound of children's laughter, a houseplant awkwardly clutched in her hands instead of a citation book. She'd chosen a peace lily. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. What happened next would challenge everything she thought she knew about community, rules, and herself. Karen Worthington's mouth hung open as she stared at the wreckage before her. The community gazebo, her gazebo, the one she'd fought 3 years to have built to exact specifications, lay in splinters beneath the massive oak that had stood for a century at the center of Whispering Pines Estates. The tree's roots had finally surrendered to last night's storm, sending 60 feet of heritage oak crashing through the roof of her crowning achievement. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she whispered, clutching her measuring tape so tightly her knuckles whitened. Just yesterday, she'd cited the Miller family for their unapproved wind chimes. Now this, nature itself defying HOA regulations. "Well, if it isn't the compliance queen herself," came a voice from behind. Karen whirled to find Dave Peterson, her neighbor of 7 years and antagonist of 6, smirking beside the disaster scene. "Guess you can't find Mother Nature, can you?" "This is not a joke, David," Karen snapped, her bob haircut perfectly still despite the morning breeze. This gazebo was insured for exactly $27,542.18. I'll need to document everything before the adjusters arrive. Dave glanced at his watch. It's 7:15 a.m., Karen. Some of us were hoping to enjoy Saturday morning without your clipboard routine. Karen ignored him, her mind already calculating the precise wording for the emergency board meeting notice she would distribute within the hour. As AHOA president for the past 4 years, she had never faced a crisis of this magnitude. The annual flower bed competition, yes. The unauthorized satellite dish incident, certainly. But this was catastrophic. Her phone rang. The board treasurer, Maeve? Have you seen it? Maeve's voice trembled. It's all over the neighborhood Facebook group. I'm standing right in front of it, Karen replied, snapping photos of the destruction from multiple angles. I'll need you to pull the insurance documents immediately. Not the gazebo, Karen. The post. About you. Karen's stomach dropped. She opened Facebook with trembling fingers to find her own face staring back at her, a grotesque Photoshop creation, showing her measuring a child's lemonade stand with a comically oversized ruler. The caption read, Bree King. Local HOA tyrant discovers joy is against regulations. 200 likes. 73 comments. All from her neighbors. Karen's vision blurred. Beneath that post was another. Screenshots of emails she'd sent the board, including one where she'd suggested installing cameras to monitor the Thompson family's unauthorized bird feeder. Then another, her detailed spreadsheet tracking lawn infractions by household. Someone had leaked everything. Karen. Maeve's voice seemed distant. The board's talking about an emergency vote. Of no confidence. Karen ended the call without responding. 4 years of meticulous rule enforcement, of maintaining property values and community standards, reduced to a social media mockery. And now, with her beloved gazebo destroyed, her authority quite literally crushed. Dave was still watching her, his expression softened slightly. You know, Karen, maybe this is an opportunity. For what? She said bitterly. To watch everything I've built collapse. To build something different, he replied, gesturing toward the neighbors who had begun to gather around the fallen tree, not in anger, but in curious community. Maybe something stronger. Karen straightened her posture, tucked her measuring tape into her pocket, and made a decision that would change everything. The lemonade stand at the corner of Maple and Elm violated no fewer than 7 HOA regulations. Karen cataloged them mentally as she approached. Unpermitted temporary structure, commercial activity in a residential zone, non-approved signage, noise ordinance concerns, obstruction of sidewalk passageway, unregulated food service, and most egregiously, a rainbow umbrella that definitely wasn't on the approved color palette. 6 weeks ago, she would have documented each violation with photographs. Today, she was carrying a peace lily and wearing jeans, for the first time in Whispering Pines Estates. Mrs. Worthington, Dave's daughter Sophie called out, waving energetically. At 10 years old, she had inherited her father's irreverence and none of his wariness. Do you want lemonade? It's my birthday. Karen smiled stiffly. Happy birthday, Sophie. I brought you a plant. Sophie examined the peace lily with unexpected seriousness. It's pretty, but where will I put it? We can't have plants in the front yard that aren't on the list. The capitalized way Sophie said the list made Karen wince. Her list, her rules. I think, Karen said carefully, that sometimes lists need updating. Dave appeared behind the stand, eyebrows raised in surprise at Karen's presence. Well, look who decided to cross enemy lines. I'm Switzerland today, Karen replied, pulling out her wallet. How much for the lemonade? For you. Free, Sophie declared. Because it's my birthday, and Mom says generosity creates community. Karen accepted the paper cup, noting that it wasn't recyclable. Regulation 8, if she were counting. She wasn't. Not today. The lemonade was too sweet and slightly warm, but Karen drank it all, watching as neighbors stopped by. Some did double takes at her presence, others nodded cautiously. Nobody mentioned the HOA meeting, her resignation, or the still unresolved leadership vacuum. By the time she finished her drink, Karen had made a decision. 3 days later, she stood again before the HOA board, this time as a petitioner rather than its leader. "I'm proposing a community revitalization committee," she explained, distributing meticulously organized binders. "Not to replace the HOA board, but to work alongside it, focusing on what our community needs rather than just what it prohibits." Helen looked skeptical. "And you want to chair this committee?" "Co-chair," Karen corrected, "with Dave Peterson." The shocked expressions around the table gave Karen a surprising satisfaction. "Dave and I don't agree on much," she acknowledged, "but we both want this neighborhood to thrive. I have the organizational skills, he has the relationship skills. Together, we might create something better than either of us could alone." 2 months later, the new gazebo rose where the old one had stood. Unlike its predecessor, an austere white structure with rigid angles, this one featured natural wood, comfortable seating, and a small library exchange box. Most shocking of all, the design had been chosen by community vote rather than Karen's exacting specifications. On dedication day, as neighbors gathered with potluck dishes previously forbidden on common property, Dave sidled up to Karen. "Never thought I'd see the day," he mused, watching children run around the oak stump, which had been artfully carved into a bench. Karen Worthington, embracing chaos. "It's not chaos," she corrected him, though without her former edge. "It's community-centered organization. Still making up rules, I see." Karen allowed herself a small smile. Some habits die hard, but unlearning. And she was. The rulebook still existed, property values still mattered, but now alongside it was something new. A growing understanding that the space between regulations was where real neighborhood life flourished. As evening fell and fairy lights twinkled on in the new gazebo, definitely not in the original architectural guidelines, Karen felt a strange contentment. Her neighborhood was messier now, louder, less predictable, and somehow, inexplicably better. Though as she watched Mrs. Henderson's new wind chimes sway in the breeze, Karen couldn't quite stop her fingers from itching for her measuring tape, just to check. Some transformations, after all, took more than a single season.